Hello reptile fans, this is Wally with Supreme Gecko, and a shipment of feeder insects just came in. I'm going to put them away, and in the meantime, we're going to talk about what it costs us to buy feeder insects for Supreme Gecko. Join me. Well, here's the box, and it's a big box. It's a big heavy box. In here we have crickets and mealworms and lots of them. So let's talk about pricing and what it costs to actually feed a group of geckos in a facility like ours. And before we even begin, let me know down in a comment what you think it's going to cost Supreme Gecko in a year's worth of food, what it costs us to feed our geckos. Leave that comment down below. Let's open this box and get started. These insects were ordered Sunday. This is Tuesday morning. I'm just going to be throwing a bunch of stuff over to the side.
Irv, clean up on aisle 7.
Irv, we were never in aisle 7.
Let's see what we ordered here. We ordered 1,000 crickets medium, 3,000 medium large crickets, 20,000 mealworms, and then we have shipping. So we're all set with our invoice. So one of the things that we're not going to talk about in this video is what we pay for feeding our isopods and our fish. Obviously we have fish upstairs, we have isopods down here, and we're going to exclude all of those costs. In general, it probably costs us about $150 to feed the isopods and about $100 a year to feed the fish, but that's excluded. We're going to talk about just the geckos. Another thing that we're going to exclude are items, food items that I might buy occasionally at a reptile show or when I go to a pet store, such as hornworms or black soldier fly or silkworms. I really don't buy enough of those to even be considered in the cost of what we feed these animals. Let's go ahead and open this bag. Oh my gosh, is this difficult to open unless you have these tin snips. Really super tricky. But with these tin snips, they open up fairly easily. Not much of a mess. Opening of these insects, hopefully all of the insects are alive. Generally we have about a 10% die off. It's just part of the process, but I know that this company that we use, the bug company, does a great job in packing, and also they send a little bit extra too, so I think that we're good with this. And as you can see, we have some food in the bottom for these crickets, and I'm going to throw some pieces of carrot in here as well. I love carrot, especially when they first come in, to hydrate them, and these carrots are nice and firm so they won't get moldy. These carrots are going to be eaten within probably about 4 or 5 hours. So what we're talking about mostly today is food items such as fruit flies. Now I'll go through fruit flies for some of the very, very small geckos. I better get a top on this right away. I'll go through about $200 in fruit flies. I know I should be growing my own, I should be raising fruit flies, but I tell you what, it's really tough to get the time to do that. It takes a lot of time to do fruit flies. Okay, this bin is all set. I'm going to go ahead and put it over here, and in just a few minutes, once I'm done with all of these crickets, I'll move them into our bug room, which stays around 82 degrees. That's better for these insects, for these crickets. I'll go ahead and mist about every other day just to add some water, but we'll constantly keep the vegetables in here and the other powder food as well. And here we go with another box. Now that powder food is actually oats that we grind up ourselves. We throw in a little bit of calcium, and that's just a perfect food for dubias and crickets and actually mealworms as well. So I tried to do these bags in the past with a razor blade, and it took forever. These tin snips work perfectly. So here's another food item that we're using in our facility. It's Pangea. We go through a lot of Pangea. We have over 60 adult containers, 70 adult containers of crested geckos and gargoyles. I cut a strip here. And we go through lots and lots of Pangea. It's a staple in our food, but we also feed the crested geckos, crickets, and mealworms and dubia roaches as well. Now that's a note that I should make really early on. We raise our own dubias. We raise a lot of dubias. It's important to supplement this schedule of feeding with other bugs simply to save some cost in what we're feeding these animals. But even so, we still feed a lot of Pangea. We're going through probably about $600 worth of Pangea a year for our cresteds and gargoyles and the crested and gargoyle babies. We also feed Pangea to some of our day geckos, and as an addition to that, we also buy honey that we occasionally put in our Pangea. I would say that we, looking back at our schedule of what we've fed this year, what we've costed this year and the second half of last year, combining the two into a spreadsheet, I came up with some of these costs, and honey is about $60 that we spend on honey a year. Let's put this one away and get the next box. If you're paying attention, I missed the carrots with that box, but I just added them in, so we should be good to go there. I'm going to throw in some carrots right away in this box. These are medium to adult crickets. Let's break that one out. So we feed the Pangea every other day to our crested geckos during the summer, spring, and fall. And then in the winter, we usually feed every other day, or at the very least, once every 3 days. You may ask why we don't feed some of the other diets. I've done the research, I've done the analysis. I'm a big believer in the Pangea crested gecko diet. Okay, I think we're all set with that. Let's grab another box. Okay, I think we're all done with our larger cricket boxes. Let's go ahead and grab the smaller one here and open that one up. So again, this was 3,000 of the medium to adults, and we have another, if I remember right, we have another 1,000 of the smaller crickets. These are always fun to put away because they are jumpy. Count how many gets away from you. Hopefully none, but you never know. I see one, I see two. Top goes on for a second. I have a few more in the box, let's get rid of those. I like these smaller boxes for the smaller crickets because we go through them so fast. They generally don't last in here very long, probably about 3 days at the most. Throw some carrots in and we're all set. And I tell you what, if it seems like I'm leaning across everything here, we have such a very, very small space to work with. I'll get rid of this box in just a second. Try to do everything over this box because there's a lot of frass still in here, and I don't want that frass getting all over the place. Now, after doing mealworms for about 20 years, I kind of have a plan of how to separate these from the shipping process that the bug company uses, and this works out really, really well for us. Find a large plastic container and just start dumping them in. If you use smaller containers or the containers that you're going to keep them in, mealworms are just going to get all over the place. We actually go through 2 different types of mealworms here. These are mediums, like I said before. We'll also buy micro mealworms for our very, very small geckos and their babies. We go through a lot of micro mealworms. It's surprising. So for mealworms alone, each year we're spending about $750 just for mealworms. Now, that cost has significantly decreased over the years. I'm going to switch the camera around a little bit so we can see these mealworms. So I think about 10 years ago, we were spending at least about $2,000. But because of the dubias, we've cut that way back while increasing our collection of geckos. Now again, we're keeping, I don't even know, probably over 500 geckos, maybe even more than that right now. Maybe 1,000. So the hardest part of this whole process is getting the mealworms out of this bag. There we go. So now the easy part is just separating out the mealworms from the paper they come in. Now we'll keep this paper because we buy so many mealworms that we actually have to put a significant amount in the refrigerator. And we'll put these into a container with the paper as well, just to absorb any moisture that might be in that package as we put it in the refrigerator. We'll keep them in the refrigerator for maybe a couple of weeks. While we're not using them, we'll pull them out. We'll keep them out for a day or two, and we'll feed them a little bit just to keep those mealworms going for as long as possible. But right out of the packaging here, we're going to keep probably, I don't even know, a couple thousand mealworms set aside for feeding, not today, but tomorrow. I always like to bring in insects, and especially the crickets, and give them about a day of gut loading before we start feeding them. Okay, there we go. Now, the tricky part is, or the concerning part is, checking these mealworms out for good and bad mealworms. And it looks like this was an okay batch. It's not a great batch. I see more than I would like to see for dead mealworms in here. And I'm not sure why, because we had great weather the last couple of days while these should have been in shipment. So let's go ahead and empty the other boxes, and I'll tell you how much we're spending on mealworms a year. And I would have to say that I'm pretty disappointed with the quality, and I'm sure the bug company will be as well. I'll be contacting them after the show. But getting back to our cost of feeders for the geckos, again, we excluded isopods, we excluded fish, we talked about crickets, we talked about fruit flies, we talked about Pangea, the mealworms. We're spending about $750 a year on mealworms. And again, I'm ordering in bulk. I can freeze these. I'll have to pick out the dead ones out of this group. We'll freeze a lot of these. We'll keep, you know, enough to feed probably a couple of weeks, and all the rest will go in the refrigerator. But we're spending about $750 for the adults. But we also get a lot of micro mealworms, as I mentioned before, and we're going to spend probably about $1,000, about $950 that I see in my spreadsheet on micro mealworms. It's a lot of money for mealworms, but again, we've cut down the cost so much by using dubias. We also feed the micros dwarf whites, a lot of dwarf whites, and that helps out to cut down the cost quite a bit. And again, I could probably cut it down by raising more mealworms, more fruit flies certainly, but it's just where I spend my time. So we're spending about $300 to $400 a month on feeders. Now that might seem like a lot, but again, we have a lot of animals and we're raising a lot of animals, and it just works out for us. How much was that in total? You probably have been have a summary going, a calculator going during this whole show. So in all, for my spreadsheet, I come up with $3,864 that we've spent so far and will spend generally round numbers by the end of this year, almost $4,000. We need to drop that down another probably $1,000 by next year, and I have some other thoughts on being able to do that, and I hope that works out. What do you think? Was that more than you thought that we spent here at Supreme Gecko for feeders during a year? I bet it was. Now, one of the keys to cutting down your costs for feeder insects is obviously keeping them healthier and not losing so many feeder insects. Watch this video right here, because I share some tips on what you can feed your feeder insects and how to keep them healthier and more alive. We'll see you next video. Thanks for watching.